The street is no longer measured by meters, but by corpses. Stalingrad is no longer a town. By day, it is an enormous cloud of burning, blinding smoke. It is a vast furnace, lit by the reflection of the flames. And when night arrives, one of those scorching, howling, bleeding nights, the dogs plunge into the Volga and swim desperately to gain the other bank. The nights of Stalingrad are a terror for them. Animals flee this hell. The hardest stones cannot bear it for long. Only men endure. Unknown officer, 24th Panzer Division. Today, I announce a launching of a new series, a series in which I have wanted to create for a very long time. We are going to be breaking down the historical backgrounds of Hell Let Loose maps. I would love to get through all of the maps in Hell Let Loose. I'm going to be doing the series somewhat chronologically, from earliest dates of the war to, of course, the war's end, as far as Hell Let Loose is concerned. And I decided to start this series off with arguably the biggest battle in world history. The Battle of Stalingrad. I'm going to try to keep this as short as I can. However, the Battle of Stalingrad is so much. There's so much depth to it. Now, understanding a bit of the Prelude, Stalingrad was a part of a much bigger operation. This is known as Fall Blau, or Case Blue. This, of course, was a German, southern thrust, trying to attack the Crimean Peninsula, the Caucasus oil fields, and, of course, the city of Stalingrad itself. This was going to be largely taken on by the German 6th Army. This, of course, is under General Paulus. Spoiler alert, he gets promoted later on. And they were supported by the 4th Panzer Army. This, of course, is under General Hermann Hoth. They were also supported by Romanian, Hungarian, and Italian units, those of which we will talk about later. Stalingrad, of course, starts off with the, outset of Fall Blau. The Germans' push to Stalingrad is almost as important as the battle itself. They had to cross the Don River, had to, capture a couple of cities, one known as Kalach, and, of course, fight very stubborn Soviet resistance all the way to Stalingrad, that of which would kind of foreshadow how the battle would go. From June 28th, 1942 to February the 2nd, 1943, this battle would take an almost immeasurable amount of life, material, and land. Of course, I'm not really going to talk too much about the battles leading up to it. Of course, this is known as the Kotlebane Pocket. Of course, there were massive envelopments, like I said, just west of the city. Eventually, the Germans crossed the Don and make it to Stalingrad, or at least the outskirts, roughly about August 23rd, 1942. Of course, the battles over Stalingrad would take place from that point on to February 2nd, 1943. And Stalingrad, the only real way I can describe it are some quotes. For example, there was a letter found on a German officer's body. He says, quote, "We must reach the Volga. We can see it, less than a kilometer away. We have the constant support of our aircraft and artillery. We are fighting like madmen, but cannot reach the river. The whole war for France was shorter than the fight for one Volga factory. We must be up against suicide squads. They have simply decided to fight to the last soldier. And how many soldiers are left over there? When will this hell come to an end? Unquote. Hell Let Loose, of course, focuses on one part of Stalingrad. That's about like the central portion of the city. Of course, there are two major, distinctive factors or areas that are on the map in Hell Let Loose. That, of course, the first one being kind of like the central portion of the map, aka like the train station, carriage depot. This area, so you're talking the northern midpoint and like the middle midpoint. You could probably even say the south as well, but I'm not too sure. In the first week of fighting for the city, this area changed hands 15 times. That is just absurd. Like, imagine being a guy and it's like the 13th, 14th, or 15th time. You're climbing over bodies, working your way through shell craters, foxholes. The buildings are just riddled with bullet holes. You're probably picking up ammo off a dead guy that, you're just running over. Like, just absolute insanity. That's the first area, that is greatly highlighted in the Hell Let Loose map of Stalingrad. The second one, of course, being Pavlov's house. This is the, Soviet fourth point, middle fourth point, if you're looking at it on the map. The real story behind it, there was a sergeant. His name was Yakov Pavlov. He had one platoon. So you're talking roughly 40 to 50 guys, right? Now, Pavlov's house, of course, is like a 4-story apartment building. In game, it's, modeled pretty close to the real thing. Basically, those 40 to 50 guys held that building for 60 days. 60 days. That is 2 entire months that these guys held off assault after assault after assault. And the Germans just could not take it. In fact, the commander of the 62nd Army, which was in charge of defending the city, General Vasily Chuikov, said, quote, "Pavlov's small group of men defending one house killed more soldiers than the Germans lost in taking Paris," unquote. Of course, Sergeant Yakov Pavlov was awarded the Hero of the Soviet Union title. This was basically the Soviet Medal of Honor back in the day. Just absolute insanity. Being able to hold out for 60 days with like 50 guys. Of course, I imagine they received some reinforcement, but, there's not a lot of documentation on that. So I assume that if there was, there's very little. Of course, there are other pretty big engagements that took place that are not necessarily on Stalingrad on the map in Hell Let Loose. Like, for instance, the grain elevator. This would be way south of where the map in Hell Let Loose is located. They were about, once again, 50 or so Red Army defenders. I believe they were mostly like a Marine regiment or like a Marine battalion, like all the guys that are kind of left, and basically held out in this grain elevator for days. And, the Germans thought, wow, they have like a whole battalion or regiment plus like holding this damn grain elevator. And, when the Germans finally took it, it says they only found 40 bodies. So, in fact, General Paulus was going to use it as a patch, for, he's going to use the grain elevator as a symbol for a patch that he was going to have designed to commemorate the battle after they won. There are plenty of other places like the Red October Steel Factory, the Barricadi Arms Factory. These are not in Hell Let Loose. There's also the Stalingrad Tractor Factory. These were, as they say, factories that were basically turned into mini fortresses that the Soviets would hold on, desperately. Now, there was one division. It doesn't say which one. It says they were Siberian. It says that they were defending one of the factories, and in 1 month they held off a combined 117 assaults. And on one day they held off 23. So just imagine 117 waves. Let's say it held out loose. You get 4 Gary spawns of 50 apiece, and they are pushing you at once, and you're just oh my god, we need to hold. And that happens 117 times. But fighting was just brutal. The Germans actually bombed the city with the Luftwaffe, beforehand, and that actually gave the Russians an advantage because now they could, fight amongst the rubble. There's one German diary that's quoted as saying, the Russians are using gangster methods. They let us pass them and then shoot us in the back. No place in that city was safe. By the time November 19th, 1942 rolls around, and this is an important date, which I will reveal why in a little bit, but by November 19th, 1942, Soviet forces in the city of Stalingrad numbered about 47,000 men, and they only had 19 tanks. This, of course, is quoted by World War II, a YouTube channel. My man Indian Idol locking it down. I love that guy. I love the channel. Love everything he does. But the reason why this date is so important is because this is when the Soviet Union would launch Operation Uranus, or Uranus, depending on how you say it, where the Soviets launched a counterattack, basically a 2-pronged pincer maneuver. About 1 million men, 13,000 artillery pieces, almost 1,000 tanks. And they didn't launch this at Stalingrad. They launched it at the north and south flanks of the city. These were defended by, the German allies, the Italians, the Hungarians, and Romanians. And basically they broke. All of a sudden, within a couple weeks, every soldier in and around Stalingrad was completely surrounded. Now, of course, not long after the encirclement, the Germans did try to break out. The German 6th Army, this is, of course, Erich von Manstein, or should I say Field Marshal Erich von Manstein. He launched what would be known as Operation Winter Storm, or Winter Tempest. Basically, he would try to attack from the west of the city, break through to the city, and get everybody out. Unfortunately, he was stopped about halfway. So it's about 48 kilometers, or about 30 miles, from Stalingrad itself. He was stopped. This began a very long attempt by the Soviets to close this pocket. So you're talking from late November, early December, until February 2nd, 1943. In fact, on Christmas Day in 1942, the Germans that were stuck in Stalingrad would eat the last of their horses for Christmas dinner. This is the last time any of them would have any kind of substantial meal, and even this was light. Almost a month later, January 22nd, Konstantin Rokossovsky, of course, offers General Paulus a chance to surrender. When Paulus asks Adolf Hitler for, permission to accept the terms, Hitler ends up promoting him to Field Marshal. Now, the reason he does this is significant because in, German and Prussian, military tradition, a Field Marshal had never surrendered. Now, of course, Paulus understood his situation. He knew that the battle was pretty much over. He decided to go through with it anyway. He said that he would not shoot himself for a Bohemian corporal, meaning Adolf Hitler. On February 2nd, 1943, Field Marshal Friedrich Paulus would surrender. He had about 91,000 men left in the pocket. Now, of course, all of these were exhausted, ill, wounded, and starving. Of those 91,000, after the war, only about 5,000 would ever see Germany again. Most of them would die in captivity, not because of increased Russian harshness, but the fact that when they went into captivity, they were starving. They had held on for absolutely as long as they could. As I said before, the Battle of Stalingrad is arguably the largest and most important in human history. I can't do the entire battle justice in just one video, especially one video focusing on the hell let loose representation of Stalingrad. I did the best I could as far as, the implications, the aftermath. Casualties are probably the infamous thing that, makes this battle so infamous. Of course, estimates vary. Axis casualties are numbered anywhere from 750,000 to 1.5 million. This, of course, is, Germany, Italy, Romania, Hungary, and some others. That's a lot of dudes just on one side. The Soviet casualties are even worse. They number anywhere from 1.3 to 2.6 million. Now, of course, this is from July 14th, 1942 to February 2nd, 1943. So all the battles leading up to Stalingrad, Stalingrad itself, Operation Uranus, and then, the German surrender and loss of life after. Of course, this was massively significant because from this point on, Germany would never have the initiative in the East again. Of course, they did try another offensive at Kursk, but we will cover that in another episode. From here on out, the Soviets are playing offense, the Germans are playing defense, and the war as we know it would take a massive turn in the Allied favor. I have a few folks to thank for the making of this. Of course, my man Smithers from Helios. Huge shout out to him. He's actually the guy that gave me the confidence to start this series and also provided some footage, for this, like the Hell Let Loose portions. I also need to thank my man Gadarian. Absolutely love that guy. The links to both of their channels, both on YouTube and Twitch, will be down in the description. I am BMAT15, aka Colonel Matthews, aka Matty Daddy, from the 10th Mountain Division in Helios. I greatly appreciate everybody coming in, checking out the video. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Of course, we're going to be covering, or trying to cover, every single map on Hell Let Loose. Started off with Stalingrad. Up next, the second battle of Alamein. So, if you guys like what you hear or what you've seen, feel free to hit that like button. Feel free to subscribe. Anything helps me out in the algorithm. And also feel free to leave a comment. Let me know if you liked what was happening here. Maybe I could do something different, whatever. But, of course, this video goes out to all the forces that took part in the actual battle. The fact that we're still talking about it, 80-something years later is huge. And also a huge thank you to Hell Let Loose for, giving people the opportunity to, at least somewhat, live vicariously through the battle. I appreciate everybody's time. I hope you all have a wonderful day. We'll catch you guys next time.